Hey, welcome back to another episode of True Crime with Lux. Today I'll be talking about David Parker Ray, the Toy Box Killer. This is going to be a very rough and graphic case today, so just a heads up to anybody that may not want to hear the details. David Parker Ray was born November 6th of 1939 in Belen, New Mexico. He had an abusive childhood. He was neglected by his parents and passed around to different family members. His grandfather mainly had him, and he was a very strict and abusive man. David would spend a lot of his time alone, just writing in his journals. To escape his life, he created a fantasy world in his head, and he would go there to just forget about his everyday life. His dad was never around due to being an alcoholic, and when he would come around, he would just beat David and then give him porn magazines that were based on torture before disappearing out of his life again. This changed David's view of sex and women because he used the images in his magazines in his fantasy world. In high school, he was shy, and this caused the other kids to bully him. He never talked to any of the girls. However, in his head, he imagined raping and torturing the women he saw. During this time, his sister found his drawings that he had made of women beaten, tortured, and tied up, and even killed. After high school, David got a job as a mechanic and was in the Army. He ended up being honorably discharged after serving. He had 4 marriages and divorces, along with 2 children during this period of life. He had a son that he named David Jr. and a daughter named Glenda, who he was very close to and called Jessie, which was her middle name. After the Army, he worked in the Elephant Butte State Park as a ranger and a mechanic. His coworkers said he was great to work with, and his boss absolutely loved him. None of them would have guessed the kind of man he really was. David was a sexual sadist. The only way he got off was if the other person was being tortured and in pain. He even once tried to see if Viagra could help him be able to have sex without the other person having to be in pain, but this didn't work, so he leaned into his need to inflict torture. Cindy Hinde, who would play a role in his crimes, was his girlfriend later down the road. Cindy also had a rough childhood. She was born on February 6th of 1969 in Seattle, Washington. She was neglected by her parents, and her stepfather molested her. By 11, she finally told her mother what was happening, and her mother kicked her out of the house. She ended up living on the streets and started doing drugs and selling them to get by. She had quite a few abusive relationships, but she wasn't completely defenseless. It was said that even though she was a small girl, she was all muscle and could beat up any man twice her size. She ended up having 3 children that she sent to live with her mom and her stepfather. Knowing what she went through, she still gave her children to them. In 1997, she was arrested after selling drugs to an undercover cop. She was supposed to go through a rehabilitation course, but instead she left Seattle and went to Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. There she frequented the bars and ended up getting a DUI. She was sentenced to 30 days in jail and a community service. She ended up doing her community service in the park where David worked. The two started going out to get drinks together and realized that they both loved sadism. By January of 1999, Cindy was living with David. On March 22nd of 1999, around 3 a.m., a 911 operator received a call. But on the other end, there was no one talking, but the operator could hear noises and scuffling in the background before the call was disconnected. The operator called the number back and a woman answered, seeming annoyed, and said that she had accidentally made the call, but everything was fine, and then hung up. The operator felt something wasn't right, so she requested the police to do a welfare check. Deputy Olston went out to 513 Bass Road in Elephant Butte, New Mexico. Meanwhile, nearby, 2 state park employees, Michael Lanford and Krista Gasty, was listening to the police radio in the office when they hear that something is going on nearby, so they offer to go as backup for the officer just in case. On the way there, they came across a car pulled to the side of the road, with a woman standing next to it. She looked very upset and explained to them that she had just seen a naked woman covered in blood with a chain around her neck running down the road. They told her to stay there and that more police were coming so the rangers could get to the house, thinking that the naked woman most likely came from there. They got to the house first, before the officer. Now, the house was surrounded by a chain link fence with signs that said "Beware of dogs." There was a sign at the gate that said David Ray, 513 Bass Road. It was a single-story home with a metal roof. The house was falling apart, and the yard was cluttered with piles of trash and vehicle parts, run-down sheds, old cars, and boats. The rangers decided to go through the gate and went up to the door and knocked, but no one answered. So they waited for the deputy to arrive, and during that time, they got another call on the radio. That 911 received a call about a naked, bloody woman with a chain around her neck running down a different road. She was trying to get help from passerbys, but no one would stop to help her. Deputy Olston finally got to the house, and the rangers let him know that they had knocked and no one seemed to be home. The deputy explained that someone else had called 911 from inside of the house, so someone had to be there. Sheriffs soon arrived on the scene, so all of them could search the outside of the house before entering to check if anyone was in need of assistance. When they entered the house, they saw that no one was in there, but what they did see was strange. Every window was covered with blackout curtains. The living room was dark and dirty with stuff all over the floor, what you would picture of a hoarder's home. There was a bed in the corner with a broken lamp next to it and broken glass surrounding it. The mattress was covered in blood and a bloody ice pick on the floor. The bed had restraints in all four corners with padlocks. Hanging above the bed were chains and hooks. There was a makeshift coffin leaning against the wall that also had restraints inside of it. Looking around more, they saw a corkboard on the wall that had torture devices hanging from it. They then made their way into a bedroom where there were two giant chains hanging from the ceiling, along with other chains and hooks. The walls had pictures and drawings of women being tortured in various positions. There was a bed and a dresser, and on the dresser they saw pliers, clamps, scissors, harnesses, and sex toys. 911 soon received another call from a lady who said that she had a woman run into her house. She was naked, bloody, and had a chain around her neck. She said that the girl had been raped and held for 3 days and needed to help. Another deputy was sent to the house, and when he got there, the older couple that lived there said that she had barged into their house and they immediately called 911. The wife was inside trying to calm the woman down. She saw the officer and immediately ran out to him. The wife had given her a robe to cover up with. The deputy could see that she had cuts and bruises like she had been beaten. She had a metal collar on her neck that had a padlock on it and a chain about 5 feet long. She yelled, "Please don't let them get me." This woman was 22-year-old Cynthia Vigil. She was the last known survivor of David Parker Ray and Cindy Hinde. She had been kidnapped by them. She said they chained her up in the house, repeatedly raped and tortured her. She couldn't remember where the house was, but she knew what they looked like and said they called each other Dave and Cindy. She said he was an officer because she saw him in his uniform. She said he told her that he was a cop and that was how he had kidnapped her. Another ranger that was getting ready to go home for the day heard the scanner and recognized the area as belonging to a park ranger. He decided to head over and see if he could help. On the way, he passed an RV and saw 2 people. The driver he recognized as his coworker David Parker Ray. He continued to the house and realized that it was David's, putting 2 and 2 together that he had just passed them on the road, most likely fleeing. He told other officers and they all went to try and find the RV again. They caught up to them and they were immediately arrested. Cindy had a deep cut on her face, so she was taken to the hospital. David was taken to a boat center nearby to be held. It said that it had better resources than the police station. Being such a small town, this case caught a lot of media attention. The state police knew that they needed help, so they called in the Mexico State Police. Wesley Lequester arrived where they were holding David and told everyone that the first person they needed to speak to was Cynthia, the survivor. Cynthia had been taken to the hospital. While she had been there, she just kept repeating, "I'm safe here." She had tried to eat, but since they hadn't been feeding her, she was unable to keep anything down. She was covered in cuts and bruises. She had burns, but the most painful part was the collar that had been rubbing on her neck. Hospital staff had to have maintenance bring bolt cutters to get it off. As soon as it was removed, she threw it across the room and was noticeably calmer. Police had taken Cindy to the same hospital as Cynthia to have the cut on her head looked at. They ended up walking right past Cynthia's room, and when she saw Cindy, she freaked out, just started yelling, and said, "That's the one who did this." Cindy told the hospital staff she had been hit in the head by a lamp. They cleaned the cut, and she was taken back to where they were holding David. On the way, she told police that Cynthia was on heroin. Police arrived at the hospital to interview Cynthia. She told them that she had lost her mom when she was younger, and to cope, she had started using drugs. She told them that she had been doing sex work to make money and that she used heroin 2 days before being abducted. She said on the morning of March 20th, she was walking to a restaurant in Albuquerque. As she was going through a parking lot, she ran into someone that she knew, who told her that there was a person in an RV that would like to hire her for her services. She needed the money, so she walked over to the driver's side and saw an older man. They discussed prices, and when they agreed, she got inside and they drove away. She said he then pulled out a badge and that she was under arrest for solicitation. That's when Cindy came up from the back of the RV and tried to handcuff her. But Cynthia fought back because she knew something wasn't right. David pulled the RV over and was able to get one handcuff on her and drag her to the back of the RV. He attempted to cuff her to a pipe, but she kept fighting until he threatened her with a cattle prod. He cuffed her to a pipe and went back to the driver's seat and began driving. Cynthia noticed that the screws on the pipe were loose, so she started to work on getting them out to escape. But as soon as she got the pipe free, David stopped the RV at a railroad track, which sent her stumbling into a wall. Hearing the noise, Cindy went back to check on her. Cindy threatened her with the cattle prod, and then her and David forced Cynthia to get naked. They then duct taped her mouth and chained her to the wall. Cynthia said the drive was long, and they had to stop for gas on the way. Cindy held a gun to her head to make sure she made no noise while they were stopped. They arrived at David's house, which ended up being 150 miles from where they had abducted her. David parked the RV right next to the door so that she couldn't see where she was. They shackled her ankles and took her into the house. They led her down the hallway and into a bedroom with brown striped wallpaper. There was a bed in the corner and trash all over the floor. They then put the metal collar on her neck, and the other end of the chain was placed on a hook above the bed. They then forced her onto the bed where they strapped her down with the restraints. She was blindfolded and gagged. She remembered hearing a tape recorder begin. It played a recording that had been made years before that they played for their victims. It explained the torture they would be put through, and that she was now their sex slave to do whatever they wanted with for however long they want. Cynthia said sometimes she was taken to another room that had torture devices and medical tools. She would be cuffed to the chain hanging from the ceiling, and they would torture her, even electrocute her. David would take pictures of the things he had done. When she woke up on the day of her escape, she said that she saw David in his work uniform. He told her that after work he had a big surprise for her, his toy box. She had heard it mentioned before, but she didn't know what it meant. Before he left, he took off her restraints, believing that she was too weak at this point to try anything, so he left her with only the collar attached to the wall. He went to work and left Cynthia and Cindy. Around 3 p.m., the phone rang, and when Cindy went to answer it, she sat the keys to the chain down on the coffee table. While Cindy talked on the phone in another room, Cynthia used her foot to pull the coffee table closer. She was able to get the keys. She thought of a plan in case Cindy came back in, so she started to push the table back where it was. However, before she could finish, Cindy came back into the room and saw what she was doing. She dropped the phone and jumped on Cynthia, trying to get the keys back. The two fought, and Cindy grabbed the lamp and hit Cynthia in the head with it. Due to the adrenaline, Cynthia wasn't fazed by the hit. The two continued fighting, and Cynthia was able to get the phone and call 911, which was the scuffling sound that the first operator heard. Cindy got the phone back and hung it up, but this gave Cynthia an opportunity to grab an ice pick that was nearby. She hit her on the back of the head with it, and while Cindy was down, Cynthia quickly unlocked the chain and ran out of the house. She started running but didn't know where she was, so when she saw the door open on the trailer of the older couple's house, she ran in and begged them not to let them get her. She asked them to please get the collar off, but they wanted to wait for the police. During the wait, Cynthia hid under the kitchen table. After hearing Cynthia's story, Deputy Wesley went back to where they were holding David and Cindy. They said that they did kidnap her, but it was to help her kick her heroin addiction. They said that they had chained her up to help her get through the withdrawal. No one believed them, and they were charged with 1 count of kidnapping, 1 count of assault, 1 count criminal sexual penetration, and 2 counts of conspiracy. They were then taken to the Sierra County Criminal Detention Center. Once there, David and Cindy refused to talk. On March 23rd, police got a search warrant for David's property. They found Cynthia's clothes in one of the bedrooms. They also found over 400 items that didn't belong to either David or Cindy, things like jewelry and clothing. During the search, police went to investigate a 25-foot semi-truck trailer that was right next to the house. It had a deadbolt, so they called a locksmith, and when they finally got inside, they realized that this was David's toy box. As soon as they walked in, they saw signs that said things like Satan's Den and bondage room. In the center was a gynecologist chair that David had modified. There were stirrups and cables with live wires along with straps to hold his victims down. It was on a track so that the chair could be moved back and forth. There was a mirror on the ceiling so victims could see what was happening. Every inch of the container was covered with different items used to torture his victims. Leg spreaders, a branding iron, leather belts, paddles, clamps, sandpaper, saw blades, needles, suction cups, forceps, and more. There were bottles of ammonia and chloroform next to the needles. They had also found various sex toys that had been modified by David. He also made his own toys out of wood, metal, and plastic. One item that detectives found very disturbing was a 15-inch dildo that was attached to a motor. There were medical books on anatomy and porn magazines on the shelves. On a corkboard, there were photos of women that had been tortured in this container. There was a TV in the corner and a camera facing the chair. The container was soundproof. After discovering all of this, the FBI was called in. They collected evidence and called in the behavioral science unit. Now with the FBI there, Cindy decided that she wanted to talk. She agreed to be interviewed. She said that she knew David was a dangerous and a sick man before even moving in with him. She said that he told her all about the things that he had done over the last 40 years. She told police that David told her that he believed that he owned all women and that their sole purpose was his pleasure. He even told her about his first murder back when he was around 19. He had abducted a random girl and tied her to a tree. He raped her, beat her, and strangled her to death. He told Cindy that he got so excited about this and realized that it aroused him. After realizing how much he enjoyed it, he continued, but put more thought into it. He wouldn't just grab someone randomly. He looked for certain women, mainly sex workers, because he believed no one would care if they died. He also had a type. They had to be attractive. He preferred Asian or Latino women with big breasts. He also told Cindy that when he was younger, he had owned land and raised cattle. One day, the FBI came to question him because they received an anonymous tip that he was trafficking women. It is believed that this tip had come from his daughter, Jessie. There wasn't evidence to link him to the trafficking, so the FBI had to drop the investigation. He bragged to Cindy that he had talked himself out of it and he got away with his crimes. Over the years, David moved around a lot. He would use a police badge to kidnap and torture women everywhere he went. It's believed that because David moved around so much was why police weren't able to connect him to crimes he committed. David told Cindy he had killed 30 people over the span of 40 years. He said 18 of them happened in Sierra County, where they were currently being held. He said bodies could be found in every state he ever stopped in. Cindy explained that he was very detailed when it came to removing all identifying items from his victims. He would remove their clothing and jewelry and anything that would help identify them. Everything in his toy box, he made. The leg spreaders were made that so if a victim tried to close her legs, she would be stabbed with spikes. He even made a Freddy Krueger glove with blades on the fingers. Everything he made was designed to cause the most amount of pain and torture. The photos that he took, he would only keep until he kidnapped a new victim. He would destroy the old photos to get rid of evidence just in case. However, he did keep detailed journals about where and when he would abduct victims, along with what he did to them and how many times he tortured them. But he never wrote down their names or what happened to them. Cindy said that she never helped or saw David kill any of the women. She just helped with the torture. Right before they abducted Cynthia, Cindy told police that they had released a girl that she called Angela. David refused to talk to the police about anything. After David's coworkers and his boss found out what was happening, they were all in shock and they said that he was a nice guy. His boss even put him on paid leave while he was in custody. They all believed that he was innocent. David's sister, on the other hand, was not surprised. She told the police about the drawings she had found when they were kids, and the conversation that they had where he told her he couldn't have sex without hurting someone. Investigators tried to get David's son to convince David to confess. Even though David and his son weren't close, his son didn't know if he wanted to get his father to confess. He still loved him and he didn't want to be involved in his arrest. Since the arrest, news stations were running stories, which actually led to a woman coming forward. Angelica Matano used to hang out at the same places as Cindy. She was now living in Colorado. On February 17th of 1999, her and Cindy were hanging out at a bar when Cindy invited her back to her and David's place. As soon as they got there, they chained her to the bed. They held her for days, and she told police Cindy helped David the whole time. She said it was 4 days that they had raped and tortured her. She begged them to stop and just let her go. She told them about her son, which made Cindy soften, and she actually convinced David to let her go. They dropped her off in the middle of nowhere, and she hitchhiked to her mom's. She was picked up by an off-duty officer, and she explained what happened to her. But he didn't believe her, so he just took her to her mom's and left. She was the Angela that Cindy said they released right before they abducted Cynthia. The FBI believed there were a lot more victims, and they decided to release some of the photos they had found at David's house in hopes of someone else coming forward or someone recognizing them. One of these photos showed a woman with a swan tattoo on her leg. They found the video of her torture that David still had. They used the image of the tattoo in hopes of getting the woman to come forward. This woman was Kelly Garrett. She called police but was confused why they were looking for her. She was friends with Jessie, but she said that she had never been to David's house. She had no memory of ever going there or what happened. She had been drugged. It was discovered that this is what he would do. He would drug them, torture them, and then let them go, and the woman would have no memory of what happened. Kelly said that she would sometimes have nightmares of being chained up, but didn't know why. July of 1996, Kelly was living in Elephant Butte with her husband. They had a fight one night, so she went to the bar where she started talking to Jessie. The two hung out all night, and Jessie offered to give Kelly a ride home. She just had to stop by her dad's house first. When they arrived, Kelly waited in the living room while Jessie talked to her dad. All of a sudden, Jessie and David came into the living room with weapons and duct tape. They put her in the toy box. Due to the drugs he gave her, Kelly doesn't remember much of what happened. He held her for 3 days before taking her in his park ranger truck back to her in-laws. He told them that he found her walking the streets. She said she never reported what happened because she couldn't remember it. She thought it was a nightmare and wasn't real. So before he was abducting women with Cindy, he and his daughter were partners. Jessie was then arrested after learning what had happened to Kelly. Cindy said after living together for only a month, they had abducted several women and only let a few go. Most of them they had killed. She said that she knew of at least 14 that had been killed during their 8 months together before their arrest. Cindy said that David would dispose of the bodies in the park. Divers were sent to search the lake in the park, but never found any bodies due to how large the lake was. Cindy said that there was another guy that had helped them, named Roy Yancey. Police brought him in and he immediately confessed that one time David forced him to kill a woman named Marie Parker. She was Roy's girlfriend at the time. They had gone to a 4th of July party at David's, where he drugged her and then took her to his toy box. David held a gun to Roy's head and told him to kill her. David and Roy then took her body to a canyon where they buried her. Roy agreed to take police to where they buried her, but when they got there, they couldn't find the body. Roy said he believed David moved the body because Roy knew where it was, and David couldn't risk him telling police. So at this point, police had no bodies, just the testimony from Roy and Cindy about what David had done. It made it hard to convict him for first-degree murder, but they were going to try anyway. David was set to have 3 different trials, one for Kelly, one for Cynthia, and one for Angelica. However, right before the trial for Kelly, Roy said he wouldn't testify. Prison guards said that he had received a note that they believed was a threat from David. Roy instead pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Then in November, Cindy started recanting her confessions. When David had heard that Cindy was turning on him, he started sending her love notes, and Cindy fell for it. She withdrew all of her statements. Cindy got 36 years in prison for the abduction and torture of Cynthia and Angelica. The only thing they had to use against David now was the video of Kelly. His lawyers tried to claim it was all consensual. They said that the woman agreed to it for either money or drugs. Some of the jury believed this story, so when they deliberated, they couldn't come to an agreement. It ended up being a mistrial. During the trial for the abduction and torture of Cynthia, she decided to take the stand on her own behalf because she didn't want him to get away with what he did, and she didn't want another mistrial. Right before the jury was set to deliberate, David's lawyer stood up and said that he wanted a plea deal. David said that he would plead guilty to all charges if they released his daughter Jessie with time served. The judge agreed, and David was sentenced to 224 years in prison. Jessie was only given 2.5 years in prison and 5 years of probation for her involvement in the abduction and torture of countless women. In May of 2002, finding God, David decided that he wanted to talk and tell police everything that had happened. However, right before the meeting, he died of a heart attack. This was only 8 months into his 224-year sentence. Thank you for joining me today. I apologize for not having a case out last week, but as you can see, this one was a bit heavy. So I appreciate everybody for listening, and I will be talking to you next week. Stay safe.